Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on today's talk, Intersectional Feminism and Marginalized Women in Hong Kong. And I think most of you would know today is the International Women's Day, and that's the reason I chose today to do the today sharing. So this was a picture of me that was back in 2019 when I first started this company, and the first event we do is actually on gender equality. So that was a event we did with PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers. They did a research on gender equality in the financial industry. So we did a presentation with some male ally. And for me, International Women's Day is really something very memorable because actually my birthday is tomorrow. So I'm having birthday in a few hours. And so I've always, International Women's Day just seems very close to me. And just a few cute picture about myself. I am now identified as a lesbian. I look quite tomboyish, but I do have moments that I look a little bit more feminine. So that was a picture of me. I grew up in a Catholic girls' school in Hong Kong, which I think is a very empowering experience. I learned a lot from it. And the picture on the left is a picture at my friend's wedding a few years ago. So I was dressing up. So just a few funny opener. So I identify myself now as a lesbian. I do a lot of work on LGBT, which I will be telling you shortly. I'm also a scuba diving instructor. It's a very important identity of me. I do work on social innovation, and I also identify myself as a Hong Konger. There's a global citizen there as because I also I lived in US, Australia, and Indonesia before because of my work. So I hope, even though today we'll be mostly sharing Hong Kong example, that you will be able to get some perspective from that wherever you are from. So just a little bit about Encompass for those of you who are not familiar with us. We are a social enterprise. So everything we do is related to the Sustainable Development Goals. So we do a lot of experiential learning workshops. So this was a picture called TEDx Encompass. We did that last year on the theme of climate change. So every time we do an event, whether it's gender, climate, or sustainable coffee, we are trying to tie it to the Sustainable Development Goal. So that's really the core of what we do here. And if you go to our website, you see we do quite a lot of free seminars, and I always really enjoy these sections, and I've done this like I think nonstop since last July, since COVID, to have regular webinar, and the people who join are really diverse. I have people from London, Iran, South Africa who join, and I'm not sure where you guys are from, and if you can share in the chat room, it will be interesting to know where you're from and to get your perspective. So a little bit about SDG 5 gender equality. I don't know how many of you have actually looked at the targets, what those SDG means. So it could be ending discrimination, ending violence. And for example, SDG 5 is also ensuring women's participation and leadership in decision making. So for example, if you look at global statistics, there are about 25 to 30% of women who are in a leadership position or in decision-making position. So it's definitely not quite there yet for gender equality. And there has been some research that in Hong Kong, in globally, it will take 120 years for us to end gender equality. To achieve gender equality. So we have quite a way to go there. So a little bit about us at Encompass. So as I said, gender equality is really something really close to my heart. So back in 2019, 2 years ago, when there was no COVID, we did a Green Women Festival during International Women's Day. As you can see some picture, there were some differently abled ladies who were performing. We also have the picture here. Xiu Feng is a really good friend. He is a genderqueer, so he was born as a woman, and then he's now a bodybuilder, and he looks quite built, but technically he is still a woman in his ID card. So today we're going to cover some of the LGBT and disability issue as well. I very much hope COVID will be gone next year so I can do this. I think it was quite fun, and actually the picture on the left here is actually a sex KOL in Hong Kong. She was giving a workshop on green dating. So we were talking about how to have environmentally friendly ways to have sexual pleasure, which I also think that's an issue that women tend not to talk about it very openly. So yes, so I'm going to start today's section with this to think about privilege. So we're going to talk about identity today, and identity is very linked to privilege. And if you don't know what privilege means, it means certain social advantage, benefits, or respect that you get because of your social identity, whether that is because of your gender, your race, your class, your profession. These are some example of privilege. So you don't see women there because women is generally being more discriminated against, and maybe some of you also share that you have been discriminated because of your gender. So I do want this to be interactive. So I would like all of you to take out your phone or your laptop. And what we are going to do now, and this is going to be anonymous, if you can go to Mentimeter, and the way it works is you go to, sorry, this is, okay, go. Okay, please go to the website menti.com. You can do that in your phone or your laptop. And the code here, as you can see, is 21210663. If you can do that, and I do want to get a few, and this is anonymous, your name is not going to show up. If you have feel any privilege because of your race, your gender, your profession, your religion, your ability, or whatever that is. So I'm curious about this group. So if you can share with me that. I can hear, I'm a sign language interpreter. Oh, that's very interesting. So it seems we do have quite a diverse group here. So anybody else have to share? So I will share my privilege. So I think I'm very lucky to be a very educated lesbian. I have received very good education in the US, and I think that has helped me to not face as much discrimination as my other friends who might be not as educated, and they might be discriminated because of their sexuality. But I feel that because of my class and my profession and my education, in general, I do not feel that much discrimination. But there are certain times, like if I go to like a public toilet, sometimes I will be questioned. It's like, oh, you're a boy, you cannot come in. So but for the most part, I do feel I'm very privileged. So we have a few educated here, and being ethnically Chinese in Hong Kong. Yes, certainly, I think ethnicity is a big issue, and we're going to talk about that later today. So second question. Just any point of life because of identity, whether that's your sexuality, because of your gender, because of what you do, or who you like, you have been marginalized. So I want to get a someone that experiences. Okay, so it seems most of us, there's no answer here. Most of us have feel at some point that we have been marginalized. So thank you everybody for participating in this short exercise. So I'm going to go back to my presentation. So yes. There we go. So I think there are many stereotypes in the society, whether it's gender or not. So as you can see here, some people may use gay as a negative term, or she's just not normal, is she? I think it's very common. If we complain about like a boss that we don't like, some people will use that term. She's crazy, she's not normal. Sometime maybe we'll tease speak somebody about the accent, or they don't, or why do you speak good English? So I think you do hear about this in the society, and I also want because we're going to talk about intersectionality today, to think about your identity. So like I shared earlier about my identity map, I identify as a lesbian, as a scuba diver. There are some identity that you might be more aware or more, you feel more privileged than another, and some identity that you are not uncomfortable. So for example, one example is maybe because of your sexuality, you are not comfortable in holding your partner in the public. And that's maybe an identity you want to hide. So I think identity do affect all of us, and I really like using identity map as an icebreaker to learn about people. And I don't know how many of you in training, you might want to try that with your colleagues. So I want to start with this. This is a picture from the Golden Globe award ceremony in 2018. And actually, this woman used the term, and you recognize some familiar face here, like Meryl Streep. And she was saying, using intersectionality to indicate solidarity across race and class. So what exactly intersectionality? Sorry, I'm going to need to mute some of you because I noticed some noise. And just so we got a clear recording, apologize for that. So intersectionality is really, it looks really complicated diagram, but basically it means that multiple social identity exists within each of us, and those identity do not work or exist in isolation, but rather they overlap, intersect, interact, or commingle. And this is in the bottom, you see a quote by Kimberly Crenshaw, which is the leading figure in the term of intersectionality. And she said, we experience life, discrimination, and benefits based on the different identities that we have. And intersectionality is a combination as opposed to addition. So it's a combination, not just adding things that create a specific form of oppression. And I will tell you a little bit more about Kimberly very shortly. So basically, there's no things as a single issue struggle. So because we do not live in a single issue life, you usually feel oppression based on many ways, okay? Not because only of your gender. And this is Kimberly Crenshaw. As I said, she was the leading figure, and she came up with the term intersectionality back in 1989. And this actually, this term came because of a court case. So in 1989, there were 5 African-American women who sued the company GM on the basis of employment discrimination, specifically against Black women. So not Black men, not just women, but Black women. However, the court weighed gender and race discrimination separately, and the reason is because GM hired Black men. There's no race for race discrimination, but Kimberly Crenshaw, as a civil rights activist, she really is against that field because she thinks that intersectionality, the combination of race and sexism, give specific issues on that on the identity. Intersectionality theory was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989, but many others have similar thoughts with that. So this is a long quote, but basically it's back in 1851, and you can see this this Native American woman. She was complaining of her identity of being in slavery and all that. So I'm going to give a very brief intro on intersectionality, and it's going to be very brief. And if you want to learn more about that topic, I'm doing a talk just on intersectionality and not later this month. But I think this will show you the idea. So let's look at Bob, okay? Bob is this really cute blue triangle, okay? Really proud blue triangle, very, very nice with stripes. However, some people don't like Bob, okay? And Bob is facing oppression of being with stripes and God hates triangle. You can see that Bob is not very happy. However, there are liberation groups about like welcoming triangle, welcoming stripes, but they don't talk to each other. So the triangle and the stripes people, they don't talk to each other. In fact, they compete. So if you think of in a woman setting. So maybe disabled woman or LGBT woman, they don't talk to each other. They think that there's no intersection. Their oppression is different. However, it's actually that the triangle and the stripes, like the LGBT or the disabled group, actually they should talk together because they are feeling oppression. And this oppression is not affecting a specific group. Oppression actually affects many marginalized groups. So the idea is intersectionality is the belief that oppressions are interlinked and cannot be solved alone. So I think I do a lot of LGBT or D&I workshop for corporates. So at my day job, I do like maybe gender equality workshop or LGBT workshop or racism workshop. But and we can talk about that in the Q&A. I'm not sure how many of you have the experience in Hong Kong as well. I think there are not enough discussion on intersectionality of how this different identity interact. And that's why I'm trying to do more work in this area, and hope through like webinars like this or different events I do, there will be a discussion, not just about gender, but gender and disability, gender and mental health, gender and LGBT. So intersectional feminism, if we look at the definition, it recognizes that Black women, queer women, trans women, and you can see many different women of color, poor women, they also experience a variety of different oppression. And for example, I'll give you an example. So there's this Black woman, working class minority woman. Is her experience just the addition of being a construction worker, being Black, and being a woman? Or is it actually they intersect with each other? So this is a diagram on oppression. It looks very complicated, but basically it means oppression exists in many forms. It can be gender, it can be racism, it can be heterosexism, it can be classism. So this oppression all intersect and affect each of us. So if you look at oppression, it can also be interpersonal. It can be from a person to person, but it can be also very systemic. It can be structural. It can be a policy, and it can also be institutional. So I don't know how many of you, for example, work in a school or in a corporates. Is there structural discrimination? And at the individual level as well. So I'm sure all of us experience some sort of, in the icebreaker, some sort of biases or discrimination because of who we are. And that can be from conscious or unconscious bias. So this is a way of understanding the intersectionality. So for example, the metaphor here is a person is standing at the middle of the road and is facing different type of oppression, whether it's race, whether it's caste, whether it's sexuality. So if the victim, if you're going to identify only a single source of responsible for the crash, is impossible because the oppression intersect together. So identities, as I said, we each have different identities, and they often intersect with one another and shaping our experience. So we really cannot address gender inequality without consider the other forms of inequality. So now I'm going to go to the key part of today, which is looking at women in Hong Kong and the marginalized women. So these are some statistics, and it's from the Women Foundation, which does fantastic work on gender equality in Hong Kong. But just to show you a very brief overview, all right? So in Hong Kong, women, a lot of women experience sexual violence. A lot of them don't report it. Women are also much more likely to face poverty or live in subdivided flat. There's also a glass ceiling issue. So only 13.6% of the directors on the boards are women. And if you're interested on board diversity, there's a 30% club in Hong Kong, which means there should be a 30% minority, especially women in board. However, we are very far from that. We also have a gender pay gap issue, and it's getting wider and wider, and unfortunately. Also, employers are likely not to hire women with children, so there's definitely discrimination there. Boys are also more likely to enter STEM-related degrees, so girls in Hong Kong are not encouraged to study STEM subjects. So these are just some high-level statistics. So there are only 55% of the women in the Hong Kong are in the workforce, and it could be gender bias, it could be lack of work-life balance. So some women were being asked to be a homemaker, and they also have more caring responsibility. And if you look at the gender equality rate in Hong Kong, we are way below Japan, or way below, well, not way below, but below Singapore. And as I said, there's also a gender pay gap. So our gender pay gap is better than South Korea, but we are twice as high with Singapore with our gender pay gap. And that's across industry, okay? Not only a certain profession. So today we are going to talk about marginalized women in Hong Kong. Because of the limited time, I'm unable to go very in depth in each subjects, but I'm going to try to give an overview. And I think there are some interesting members here. I noticed there was one of you is a sign language interpreter, so maybe you can share more on what you think about differently abled later. So I'm going to start with ethnic minorities. So ethnic minority consists of 8% of our population in Hong Kong, and about half of them are migrant domestic workers. And you can see in Hong Kong, we do have a diverse race. So we have Nepalese with Indian, Filipino, and Pakistan, Thai and Indonesian. And the term ethnic minority is generally referred to all those you see is being bracketed, but not Japanese. So there's actually another term for ethnic minority in Hong Kong is non-ethnic Chinese, because when we talk about ethnic minority, we really meaning South Indian or Southeast Asian in Hong Kong. So the educated level in ethnic minority is in general much lower than just the normal population, as you can see here. And whereas 1 in 7 women in Hong Kong live below poverty line, and if you look at the EM, it's 1 in 5. So you might know, like, a lot of this ethnic minority, they might be living in Jordan or Sam Shui Po and living in not very ideal condition. And another really big problem ethnic minority face as a group is that in Hong Kong that the Cantonese language learning for them is not very adequate, whereas knowing Cantonese in itself does not necessarily help with integration. However, without a Chinese linguistic ability, it's hard to get high up in the upward mobility in Hong Kong. And even though the job advertisement that does not state Chinese language as a proficiency requirement, it is found that most employers still expected job seekers to have a command of Chinese. So not being able to use Chinese fluently is definitely a hindrance for ethnic minority in Hong Kong. And another case here, and this is a very interesting study by Sumit Marie Tam back in 2010 about generation of Nepalese women in Hong Kong. They are Nepalese women in Hong Kong are primarily assigned domestic roles, with wifehood and motherhood being the norm, and where the migration marriages take place, women contribute to the production and maintenance of social and economic ties between Hong Kong and Nepal, making it possible to improve survival possibilities of the patrilineal families of both their families, fathers and husband. So it is important for this marriage out there. However, a lot of them are pre-arranged marriage, and they also face discrimination as with the gender, and also as a status as ethnic minority. So this is one of the very key study on the on ethnic minority women in Hong Kong, and here I also show you. There's a Hong Kong-born Nepali girl who speak to UN about local ethnic minority fight against racial discrimination. And I think it is very real. I think I don't know how many of you are aware. Just a few months ago, when the 4th wave of COVID hit, there was a news that there was a customer at I forgot the delivery of Foodpanda was trying to place an order, and he specifically mentioned in his note that he does not accept ethnic minority as the delivery person. So it can show you racism is very real in Hong Kong. So another problem for ethnic minority girls in Hong Kong is that they are being forced into this marriage. So child marriage is unfortunately still very common in Hong Kong ethnic minority, and girls as young as 14 are being forced to marry. And because of COVID, of the poor economic condition, this situation seems to have worsened. So now I'm going to talk about migrant workers. So we talk about ethnic minority, which consists of 8% of the population in Hong Kong, and migrant domestic worker, which most of them are female, consists of 4% of the total population, which is half the ethnic minority. So that, if you put it in the number figure, that's 390,000 for one domestic worker. And I'm sure a lot of you are aware of them in your daily life, and especially if you walk around in Central in the weekend. So majority of this domestic workers are females from Philippines and Indonesia, and they have a very big economic input to the Hong Kong. So because of their workforce, they contribute an estimated of US 12.6 billion to our economy. However, they face many problems. It could be gender-based violence, it can be racial discrimination, and also they are subject to different rules from other foreign workers. So for example, if an employer chooses to terminate a contract with a migrant domestic worker, the migrant domestic worker must leave Hong Kong within 14 days. This very unforgiving rule mean many migrant domestic workers are forced to work very long hours, skip holidays, forgo fair compensation. This campaign, as you can see from this picture from migrant worker in Hong Kong, is very common. It's actually more common than I thought. They are really facing a lot of discrimination and oppression. And one of this oppression is the live-in rule in Hong Kong, that migrant domestic worker must live in with their employers. So actually just even last year, there was a court case of Filipino domestic worker, Conancy Lubiano. She was trying to file a complaint to overturn the rule that forces the woman to work at the same home as the employer. And the reason is because if the live-in policy heighten the risk of labor exploitation, because employers may ask migrant women to perform domestic work on their mandatory leave day, and also abuse. However, the judge turned down the appeal, so it's still not being overturned, this rule. So now I'm going to turn to refugee women in Hong Kong. I think there are more refugees in Hong Kong than we really than we think. I think the population of refugees in Hong Kong is now about 15,000, and they face a lot of issues. They are unable to work legally because of their refugee status. They only have a very small subsidy to live in Hong Kong, which is, I think, just lower than 2,000. And we all know how expensive it is to live in Hong Kong and to get for food. It also they have a very long waiting time for asylum claim. They don't have very good quality medical care, and people have this stigma and discrimination with them. And if you're interested to help this refugee, for example, Refugee Union is a good organization to volunteer with, to maybe give them food or teach them Cantonese. So one of the examples I want to share is art woman. It's from my friend Clarice here. She's a former nurse from Congo. She organized art and craft workshop for female refugee. So I think this is some positive news about Hong Kong women refugees. And for me, for Encompass here, what you see here is actually menstrual cup. So I actually organized this workshop with Luna Natural, one of the brand who provided this cup. And what we did is we did a public workshop, and then we raised some fund. So we were able to give a free workshop and also donate some cups to this refugee woman to elevate this concept called period poverty. I don't know how many of you have heard of that. So I mean, as women, we need to use a lot of period products, and they are not cheap. And especially for refugee women, they might not be able to afford it. So menstrual cup is a good solution is hygienic, and it also save the plastic and also save them money. So that's some of the work I'm trying to do to help this woman. So differently abled woman. This is a picture of the ladies who performed at the Green Women Festival 2 years ago. I personally have a lot of experience with differently abled individuals. One of my first job is at Outward Bound, so I helped a lot of them to try to reach their comfort zone. I also teach scuba diving, and I have been teaching differently abled women. So they face a lot of different issues. So one of the issue maybe is sexual harassment, especially for those who have a mental issue, or intellectual issues. So because those women might not be, they may not be willing to seek help, or they also may be unable to communicate their problems because of their limited communication skill. Another problem is marriage. It's not easy for women with disability to find their lifelong partners. When an able-bodied man marries a woman with disability, he may be considered very kind. But if it's opposite, when an able-bodied woman is married to a man with a disability, the traditional society perception is that the man must be very capable. So it does seem there are certain gender biases here. So another problem is employment. So majority of disabled women have low education and skill and have to work on some very simple work. And comparing with other people, women with disability tend to work harder and have less salary. And a lot of them don't have a permanent job and only can rely on support from their family and government. Another issue is because of the disability, they tend to have higher expenditure because of their medical fee. So because of this inequilibrium, they tend to stay in poverty. Another issue is child rearing. So pregnant women with disability, they may face more obstacles. For example, if a woman with wheelchair, they might not be able to attend comprehensive antenatal checkup due to the lack of barrier field facility. And I feel that a lot as well when I teach diving. I'm just trying to find like a barrier-free cafe to meet with a student. It's so difficult. So Hong Kong is not a disabled-friendly place, definitely. I do want to share something a little bit more lighthearted later about disability. So this is Association of Women with Disability in Hong Kong. They provide direct service to the women in need. They also have policy formation for women with disability to enhance their social and political participation and arrange a regional conference. So if you're interested in learning about disability, that's a good organization to check out. And then this is my friend Carmen. So Carmen is a sex advocate, a writer, and a former speaker in TEDx. There has been a lot of prejudice against differently able women that they should be treated as asexual and decline the rights to be a girlfriend, a wife, or a mother, or enjoy sexual pleasure. So Carmen has been doing talks in the community to educate people about the sex rights of differently able women. So I personally find this very empowering. I think we really need to respect differently able individuals, and they have the same rights as all of us. And then queer women. So this is a topic that also very close to my heart as a lesbian myself. Unfortunately, in Hong Kong, because of everything, politics, our anti-discrimination legislation based on sexual orientation, it has been in discussion since the 1996. But because of everything that's happening in UNESCO, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Also, we don't have same-sex marriage like in Taiwan. And there are also limited protection of rights, whether it's adoption, inheritance, housing. In the last few years, there have been some positive cases, like the QT case, or that LGBT people have more rights, but it's usually mostly through judicial review. Another problem is a queer woman also faces sexual violence, just like heterosexual women. So this research funded by Her Fund and Les Corner, they found that 3 out of 4 people from female sexual minorities have experienced at least one type of domestic violence, and many of them reluctant to seek help from police or social welfare authority. So sexual violence not only affect heterosexual women, but also affect homosexual women. Another topic I really like is migrant worker and migrant pride. So because of the very unequal men to women issue, men to women ratio in domestic worker in Hong Kong, there are quite many migrant workers who are who might be queer, and they face double discrimination, double oppression because of that. And so this was in the last few years, there has been more awareness on this issue, and some of this migrant worker organized migrant pride to raise awareness. So a little bit about myself, I also do work on LGBT. So I have been the director of IDAHOT, International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia for 2 years. I've touched on issue on transphobia and biphobia, giving talks in university and high school. I also organized LGBT tour, and hoping more people will understand our city and how we navigate the scene. So if you're interested, we can talk about at the end of this talk. I can share more about my work there. Now it's sexual violence. So I think all of us know that Me Too has been quite a big movement in the last few years. And this picture here is Lui Lei Yiu. Lui Lei Yiu, she's a famous athlete in Hong Kong, hurdle runner. And she came out a few years ago saying that she was being harassed by her coach. This case has been lost in the court. However, she was being commended for being the first to speak out at court of her sexual abuse and encourage other women to speak out. So one of the case, unfortunately, with the protests in Hong Kong in 2019, there has been reported that the police also has committed sexual violence against women. So that is quite unfortunate. But I think in Hong Kong now we face many different other issues as well. And if you're interested on intersectionality in Hong Kong, I really recommend you to read the work by Pooja Kabar. She's a law professor at Hong Kong U. She has published many work on this topic about ethnic minority, about sexual minority, about violence and how they intersect, and looking at how legislation and policy framework identify this issue. I don't have time to go through all of that, but if you are interested at that, I really recommend you to read the work by Dr. Kabar. Another one I want to mention is Resolve Foundation. So Resolve Foundation is an NGO formed about 3 years ago, and they do work on racism. They work on intersectional identity, and they actually now they have a equality campaign coming out called Every Action Counts, talking about how you can combat racism, combat sexism. Personally, I'm very attached to this organization. I have been their mentor last year, and I was mentoring ethnic minority social worker in Hong Kong, and about helping how to help her to navigate the Hong Kong social sector scene, and giving her some guidance. And actually this year I recommend the intern of Encompass. Her name is Josie. She has a rare disease, or she lives on a wheelchair and have many multiple health problems. And I recommended her to join the fellowship of Resolve this year to get inspiration as a disabled leader. So if you want to learn more, they also have a lot of resources on their website. You can take a look. So I'm ending with this, the effects of COVID. So COVID affect all of us, and it particularly affect grassroots community, ethnic minority, single mother. It also have a digital divide. Those who cannot afford like very good Wi-Fi or electronic device, they might have learning problems as well. So COVID just make everything worse, unfortunately. I want to end with this, that UN Women Regional Leader Mohammed Nasri is calling Hong Kong and its private sector to be more proactive in terms of reaching gender equality. I know Hong Kong as a society now is facing many issues, but I do hope that despite everything that's going on, that we will make some progress. So I hope the takeaway today, as we can see, I really briefly go through like disabled, ethnic minority, and LGBT and all that, that we have multiple experience and they can be very complex. So hopefully intersectionality is a way for us to understand and address this complexity. So I do want to end with some actions. What can you do? So I think to understand yourself, why you have those maybe biases or inequality, and encourage and model intersectional viewpoints. So like I said, like the identity map, I think is a good way if you want to break the ice and discuss intersectionality with your friends. Yeah, be a good ally. So even though I think be a good ally for a disabled person or for LGBT person or for for ethnic minority, do what you can to support each other. And as International Women's Day, I do want to end with this. So this year, the theme is choose to challenge. So you can choose to challenge calling out gender stereotype, about calling out gender actions. So there are many ways you can make a difference. So I think I will stop there. I think I've speak too much, and I would love to hear what you guys think or any thoughts on what I share. Oh, okay. Shaki asked, "What's green dating?" Okay, so green dating is I engaged this my friend Good Mona. She's a sex KOL, so she does work on like raising awareness on how to women to have sexual pleasure. So actually, the workshop we did on green dating is we suggest some ways you can be environmental friendly in your dating. For example, if you do need to have sex and use lubricant, you can use organic lubricant, or you can use massage to stimulate sexual pleasure. Use different ways. Doesn't need to be plastic. So I think it's just basically a fun way to look at dating and how to minimize waste and have a less ecological footprint. So Marie had a comment, very unfair rule. Seems many homes do not offer adequate living conditions for helper. And I certainly agree. I think in Hong Kong, because of our poor housing condition, many of us doesn't have a very big flat. And I think some migrant workers are forced to live in a very, very small area. And it's definitely very unfair for them. And then I have Beverly to share. Beverly, do you want to say a few words as a non-Hong Kong? Listen to that. What are some thoughts? I'm going to pick on you because you're my friend.
Thank you for inviting me to your talk. It's really great to hear. Yeah, I look at intersectionality in the United States and Asian American issues here. And so it's really interesting to go to Hong Kong and to see, how even like my personal identity changes, like as a biracial, bisexual woman in the United States, going to Hong Kong and then realizing what does it mean to be, of Hong Kong descent and stuff like that, and just understanding the different context of LGBT issues and so on. So your talk was really informative. Thank you.
I do want to because I'm mostly coming from a Hong Kong perspective. I don't know how much intersectionality you think is that covered enough in US or in your setting, or that
no, definitely not. And I wrote my master's thesis in women's studies on women who are bisexual and biracial to try to change this additive model. And so my argument was start with the person who is bisexual and biracial. How does that person conceptualize their identity and relate to other people and build alliances? And so based on that model, I think that a lot of times when we have this expectation that people of our same identity group is going to really be a good ally, a lot of times we set ourselves up to be disappointed from that. And so a lot of times we're in a position where, oh, someone else who's queer, bisexual, or Asian or Chinese disappointed me. So I try to create a model of solidarity, so it's really about conscious solidarity, like people, it's an action, who has your back and who really, you know, puts that forth, that effort. And so I think you're really demonstrating that solidarity of, even in your suggestions of, you know, really try to connect with people that are different than you, and have that solidarity with groups that might not encompass you. And for my current work now, I think the disability topic is just so key. Like that's a really, really important issue. And I really try to include disability specifically in all the work I do. Just one example is I'm writing, I just finished writing a book on digital nomads. So these are people that work remotely from laptop and travel the world. And so within that community, it's very white male based. And so there's a lot of issues with marginality in that community. And so just thinking about tech work or thinking about travel, even like LGBT folks, people of color, disability, like when you think about travel and tourism, like a lot of that, those models are based on this kind of white normative, white family, heteronormative family traveling. And so what about people who are queer traveling the world? You know, like perhaps they have to consider extra security issues, or people of color facing racism, or just, you know, disability, like where are accessible travel locations and stuff. So I was really excited to hear that you're doing, you know, diving with the disability community and stuff. That sounds super awesome. And so even just following some of those accounts on social media, really making yourself aware, like I want to be more educated on disability issues. I think that that might be a blind spot for me. So I'm really trying to read about it, follow those Instagram accounts, and just think about that myself, like asking about accessibility questions at different locations, just in general, to kind of make myself more aware, make that person more aware, and just put it on the table.
Thank you, Beverly. So I'm going to answer some of the other questions. So Marie asked, where do the refugee come from mainly? What are the origin country? I would say quite a bit of them are from Africa, and some from Middle East. I know there's quite a Yemen population of refugee in Hong Kong. But I don't have the statistic on top of my head, but I would say it's mostly Africa and Middle East. So another question from Doris. Could you talk a little bit about widespread discrimination against immigrant women from the mainland? The problem at the moment is intertwined with the political situation and tension with Beijing. Thank you. Okay, let me try to do this. I think Hong Kong is now in a very tense situation because of the politics, and definitely, which I didn't cover today, is the issue of new immigrant women, and because of their education or because of their language ability, there has been discrimination. And I think because of the political situation in Hong Kong, there has been quite some unfair, definitely attack on mainlanders as well, and not only just on women. I think I saw Grace is tuning in, so she will be good to answer that. I think another another problem now is also not just in this, not just new immigrant women, but also students from mainland who are studying in Hong Kong. I also think they may have been attacked unfairly just because of where they come from. But this is quite a big issue. I think now the tension between Hong Kongers and mainlanders, I don't know if what Grace think, I don't know if it's going to worsen or it's going to be better, because now that because of everything that's happening, people are a little bit less expressed. So there might be discrimination, but maybe a very subtle one, but they might not be as overt of a discrimination or attack on mainlander as from now on. I don't know if that's a fair take. Yeah. Yeah, but thanks for that issue, Doris. I actually that was a good point. I didn't include that in the main part for discrimination, but I definitely new immigrant women are facing a lot of issue. Yeah. And I noticed from our eyes breaking activity, there was a lady here who shared that she's a sign language interpreter. So I assume she also worked on some work on disability. And I'll be curious to hear from that person what are their thoughts on today's presentation. Is that person still here? No, I lost her. Lucy, do you have any? Hi, Lucy. I know you're my friend. What do you think about what I said?
Hi.
Hi. Hi, friend.
Hi. Yeah, no, very happy to have heard your talk. I learned a lot. Actually, I want to say hi to Lorna, who's my friend. we work on other issues.
Yeah.
What a coincidence. No, I was only vaguely aware.
Hi, Lucy.
Hi. Only vaguely aware of the intersectionality issue, but you really gave a much deeper analysis on it, so it's good. I just working in Hong Kong in the last year made me realize a lot of the vulnerable groups are women. And you talked about migrant workers and refugees. The thing with refugees in Hong Kong is that what do you call that? The success rate is very, 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 very low.
Mm.
To the point that it's something silly, like 0%. So the point that people are really stranded in Hong Kong without any possibility to live a life like a normal life. So yeah, just wanted to mention that because obviously there's some interest in the discussion box.
Thank you, Lucy. I also, hi, Kat. So Kat is the sign language interpreter here, and she made a comment. I wonder if future work can arrange accessible language to the deaf community. You mean live captioning and simultaneous interpretation to Hong Kong Sign Language? I definitely think, I think it has been better, but I think the government really need to set a good role model of the press con need to have more sign language as well. And also I think as a society as a whole, that whether it's NGO or corporate to offer those services. I noticed, I don't know if that's fair, but I think like Australia and New Zealand, I think they do a much better jobs in providing accessible language for the deaf community. And there has been like really slow improvement in terms of disability. Just a few years ago, I think the first movie which designed with captioning, sorry, how do I say it in English? For captioning for blind people. So you actually use the word to describe the image in the movie. There was a movie in Hong Kong called 逆流大叔. That was the first movie in Hong Kong that was designed to have that. But before that, I think the awareness was really low. But I hope it will be slowly changing. But I don't know what you think, Kat. I do think Hong Kong as a society are very unfair for disabled people. And as I said, I think just in terms of accessibility, that even like places like Hong Kong, there are many areas you can't go with a wheelchair. And like just our language, our books, and it's not even, not even disability. Just think about all the ethnic minority in Hong Kong. So one case in point, I think, is with COVID. And there was, I think it was 2-3 months ago, there was a large outbreak in Jordan. And there were a lot of ethnic minority there. And the government came out like 5 days later, having like the COVID test instructions in different language, which they should have done like long time ago, because they cannot expect every ethnic minority can read or write English or Chinese. So this seemed that we are very backwards in terms of language, whether they are for disabled or for able body. But yes, many, and I think inequality SDG 10 is really linked to gender inequality. I think there's a lot of inequality issue in Hong Kong. And if you look at the Gini coefficient, our Gini coefficient is 0.539, which means it's very high for developed countries. And unfortunately, I think with COVID and with the political situation and with the poverty and unemployment rate, it's going to be worsened. I think the Gini coefficient is going to worsen, and how we face a society as a whole and help those who are less fortunate to gain opportunity. That's really an issue. So like I was mentioning, the Green Women Festival that I do, and I that include the sexual minority, the disabled, and even migrant workers. I have migrant workers who help me as helper, and for me, I think it was very empowering for me and for them, because I think for migrant workers and a lot of them do fantastic job. They use their Sunday, they use their day off to help clean like Hong Kong garbage. And they really want to be part of our community and not just domestic worker. They want to be part of our society, to contribute and to enjoy Hong Kong culture. And I think they we are very unfair for them. And Shakik was saying there's no EM in Hong Kong government. Yes, that's true. There was ethnic minority Jeffrey Andrew. He was trying to run for Leshko last year. Unfortunately, he was among those 53 people who got prosecuted. He didn't get put into prosecution last week with the mass prosecution, but he was one of the person that named. So Jeffrey Andrew was supposedly the first hope we have to have an EM in the government. But yes, I don't think there's enough representation of ethnic minority in our decision making, given they are 8% of our population. Yeah. I don't know if you have any more thoughts to share of that. Sorry, I'm not getting your name right. Shaki, do you want to share your thoughts on that about ethnic minority and yeah.
And hey, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Please share.
Yeah. You can call me Rita.
Oh, Rita. Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. We have so little, if any, representation in the Hong Kong government, in the police force, or in the government offices anywhere at all. And it's a systemic problem. From when we're at school age, we're being put into different schools. We're not being taught Cantonese, and then once we hit 18, just to enter the university, you need to have fluent Chinese. To get an average job, you need Cantonese. And if there are any anti-discrimination laws, I don't even know if they're being enforced properly, if at all. So, right now it's a pretty bleak situation. You're right about Jeffrey Andrews. He was put into jail. We have a few NGOs here and there, like Unison, that are trying to do work on our behalf, but it just seems like a very bleak situation. We're always being sidelined. And like you mentioned, the Deliveroo Food Panda scandal, no one blinks an eye. It's we have it pretty bad. Unfortunately, I come from a place of privilege, but I completely understand the struggles of the EM, the domestic helper, migrant worker community. And honestly, it's even more heartbreaking to see how far behind we are compared to countries like even Singapore. So we have a lot of work to do for sure. And this presentation was very, very eye-opening. Thank you so much.
Do you mind if I ask, are you working in gender equality in your work, or what? Or it seems you are working on something on the social issue.
No, I'm working a very corporate job in Central. You might call me a sellout, but once in a while I have volunteered for NGOs, for example, like Christian Action, Unison. But that's not my everyday job. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I also want to share a story about ethnic minority in a different angle. So I was talking about migrant pride, about like ethnic minority and migrant worker and LGBT. I also have a very personal story. So I have a good friend. Her name is Dee. She's ethnic Indian, growing up in Hong Kong, went to school in German Swiss. She cannot she understands briefly some Cantonese, but not a lot. And it also happened that she is bisexual. And we always make jokes, and she said she's a human rights lawyer, very educated. And we always make joke that she had a hard time to date in Hong Kong as a queer woman because of her race as well. And another story is Xiu Feng. Let me show you the picture again. The gender fluid bodybuilder that I was mentioning, my friend. And so he identified as a genderqueer, so not man, not woman. And actually that identity is giving him some problems. So this is Xiu Feng, because there's also like discrimination within the LGBT community. Like the trans people doesn't like the genderqueer people. They think they should just choose binary. They shouldn't be non-binary. So it's interesting for me to see there's so much discrimination even within their own marginalized community. So LGBT as a community being discriminated, and there's certain discrimination within the community. And another example is lesbian. I don't know if Beverly agree with me on that. Is I think some lesbian women doesn't like bisexual women because they think, oh, you can pick anyway, so you are not going to be a loyal lesbian. I don't want to date with you. So I think there's definitely a lot of discrimination everywhere. I don't know what Beverly think about that, or Grace. Yeah.
Is it okay to talk?
Yes, sure. Grace, hi.
Hi, sorry to be late. I don't feel like I know that much, so I really shouldn't. I think it's just my opinion, but yeah, I feel like biphobia is a problem. And I was also talking to a new friend today, and she was telling me that transphobia is also like a really big problem in the lesbian community in Hong Kong. And a little bit tangentially, I mean, so I teach, and so I meet a lot of like, or I meet some like male students who identify as gay, but like what they tell me too, just about like the way that men treat each other in the gay male community also sounds toxic to me in various ways, in terms of like there's a definite hierarchy depending on your appearance and all these other things. And so yeah, I think a lot about how to sort of like, I don't know, but I would like to learn more about how to try to fix these problems in the LGBTQ community too.
Yeah, so yeah, thanks for that, Grace. So I shared earlier in the presentation that I did Idaho for 2 years to talk about transphobia and biphobia. And I think the education is both within and outside the community, the LGBT community. I think Kat has a comment as well. Transphobia and homophobia are also very common within the deaf community. We definitely need more accessible education. Yes, I actually it's quite interesting. One of the students I teach with diving, she's a queer disabled person. Her name is Hester, and like the discrimination she faced as a queer disabled is very hard, and also like the homophobia. I think there's definitely a lot of homophobia in the disabled community. In Hong Kong, I don't know about elsewhere, but in Hong Kong, I feel that's why when I talk about the example of Bob, the triangle and stripes, I think that the LGBT community and the disabled community don't really talk to each other, but they actually face the same kind of not same, but like they face oppression in different ways. But definitely, I think we need solidarity across different oppression, so people understand that social justice, human rights issue is not a single issue; it affects all of us. So I think if there's one take-home message, that's my message. Like the oppression, whether you're LGBT, disabled, bisexual, it affects all of us. Yeah. Any more things you want to share, Kat? I like your example. If you can share some more about your work, that would be good. Or Lorna, if you want to share, Lorna.
I just want to share about, yeah, well, it's not a new issue. It's about foreign domestic workers, as you are telling a while ago. We all know already their sufferings and their request to the government as their, the live-in issue, and the work time, what should it be? It's not specific in the contract as whatever, or their rest days, what's the rest, what time to what time is the rest day is in the contract. It's just say 24 hours. And of course, how can you implement that? How can you do that if you are living with the employer? Of course, for example, for most of them have no room. They are just in the living room, sleeping in the sofa or on top of the fridge, on top of the washing machine. So how can they do that rest day as rest day? For example, especially now that the COVID, many, because I'm in the group of social justice for migrant workers and also in our group of the food and accommodation, most of the newcomers and all those who are already here for a long time are getting stuck about the days off. Because the immigration and the labor department send email to all employers, most employers, to not let their domestic workers have to go out, but letting them stay at home to have a safe, but then to take a rest. But most employers, as they complain to me in with all those screenshots and those recordings, that the employer says that even the labor department and the immigration department are talking us or are telling us not to let you go out. We take the day off and stay at home. But the thing is, they stay at home working. And it's very nice if they can sit down, if they can do their own thing. But most of them, because they're taking children's, they're taking babies, they're still like an ordinary day, ordinary working days for them. And you know what, mental health, as we are talking, as we took with Lucy, that it's very, very critical and very, very risky as of this time, because mental health is as necessary or as important as our physical health. Whatever in the mind, whatever the problem in the mind will go with the body. So if the mind are stressed, if their minds are stressed, they cannot think properly, and also their body will become weak, and they cannot focus on their work. So every thoughts of them are already negative, and the negativity will already become stressed, anxiety for them. So it end up a no good relationship already. It's no longer a harmonious relationship atmosphere within the workplace. That is creating too much for the employer and the employee as well. Well, it's very difficult also to tell them to be patient or to talk to the employer, because some employers also, we cannot blame them, because they also suck from work. Only one is working already due to COVID, or they are working from home and they are not also used to it, something like that. So it's two to tango sometimes, but most of the time their complaint is about the rest days, food, accommodation, unending things of, for example, because of the employer is already also stressed, so she is letting her worries into the helpers. So the helper also just absorb all the negativity, and so she will also being negative sometimes, because they are stressed in their work, and also back home in the Philippines, when this also COVID back in the Philippines is getting worse. So they're also worried for their family, as well as worried here on how they will have a good relationship with their employers of this time.
Thank you, Lorna. I learned a lot from you. I think maybe we need to do another separate section just on migrant worker issue and about the injustice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to quickly respond. Kat, she was mentioning she is doing some work with LGBT and deaf friends in terms of education material. That's fantastic. If you have some of that in draft or whatever form, please do share with us. I will share with this group. I think it's very helpful. And then Grace has a question. I'll try to answer it as short as possible. I do need to run in a few minutes. So Grace was asking how to promote awareness of problem of transphobia, racism in the LGBT community. And also given that there's a gap between LGBT people educated overseas and maybe a more political radical community. What I think in Hong Kong is I think there's also another issue is a disconnect between the English speaking and the Chinese speaking LGBT community. I think there are some really local grassroots LGBT community which has been in Hong Kong. Maybe Hong Kong Rainbows have been in Hong Kong for over 20, 30 years. And they feel like the more Western LGBT organization, they are using the Western approach, Western ideal in promoting the concept. So there's definitely this really conflict within the LGBT community. And I don't think there was like Pink Alliance, an organization I volunteer with, have this grand idea of being the umbrella of all LGBT organization and as an alliance, LGBT working together. But I think just with every community, whether it's whether it's democracy or whatever, there are many different camps. And I don't have a good answer, but I think what I try to do when I did Idaho is try to use both approach, try to make my material as bilingual as possible, and not just in Western material, because it tends to be like, especially in corporates, I think a lot of the materials is in English only, especially on racism. There's very few little material in Chinese on racism. And that will deter some people from learning those issues. So I think to start with just language, that might be one way to address those issues. And then Saki said, the treatment of domestic workers in Hong Kong is equivalent of slavery back in the day. Yes, I do agree. Lucy said in the beginning, you said if you don't have to think about it, you are privileged. For domestic worker, some of them cannot even go out for physical exercise and meet up with friends and social support, but these activities are essential for physical and mental health. Yes, I agree. I think we are very unfair for migrant workers, and even like in the Sunday, right? You go to Central and all of the Central are migrant workers because they don't have anywhere to go. And if they go to like any maybe parks or something, they might be unwelcomed. So yes, we are very unfair of them. And I don't have a very good solution, but I do see some migrant workers are taking a more active approach. Some of them form like hiking groups or cleanup groups and try to make a difference in the community. Yes. And I'm sorry, everybody, I have to jump to another work call, so I need to end this section, but it was very good to hear from you and all your experience, like Kat sharing about the sign language, Bethany about intersectionality, Lorna about migrant worker, and Rita about migrant workers. So I really appreciate all your comments and feedback, and maybe Rita and Lorna, if you're interested on discussing, and Kat as well, if you want to discuss like disability, racism, migrant workers separately in a different issue, maybe we can work on something like a webinar or an event to promote more awareness. I'm really open to ideas. So if you like, please shoot me a message, and I would love to talk to each of you. So with that, I do need to run. So good night, everybody, and have a good night. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.